What's up, you guys? Welcome to Indie Game Business. I'm Indy, and that guy way over there, that's Jay. And in the middle, we have Kate Edwards. And Kate was the executive director of IGDA, right? And other things. So let's hear some other things as well.
Yeah. So Kate, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
I know it's early your time and it's early Indy's time, but we don't really mind waking him up early in the morning. But so tell us, give us the short version. Walk us through, one, how you got to the industry, because that's always one of the, most hilarious and, off the wall, because none of us get in like, it's not like a regular job. We all have these random stories for getting in. So tell us how you got in, and then just walk us through your career a little bit.
So basically, my career path was like many who are in the industry, especially many who are of the older generation like me, because back when we were, going in, graduating high school and going into college, there were no game design programs. There was nothing formal about creating games. And so we basically were just winging it. In my case, I actually, after I kind of got through my aspiration of being a conceptual artist for Lucasfilm, just so I could work on Star Wars, I actually ended up going into geography and cartography because I always have had a fascination with cultures and maps and all that good stuff. And so that's actually my academic background. And I did got my graduate degrees as well in geography. I did my master's thesis on using virtual worlds technology for mapping. This was way back in 1991. And I was going to pursue that direction, actually, of pursuing VR and cartography. But then I got pulled into Microsoft on a temporary job to work on Encarta Encyclopedia as a cartographer. This way back in 1992. And then I ended up working there for 13 years. And while I was there, I created a new kind of team inside Microsoft called geopolitical strategy. So my job was to essentially use my geography background to help protect the company from geopolitical and cultural risks that were in the content of the product. And so once before the Xbox project got cranked up, I was working on Flight Sim, and I worked on a lot of the PC games at the time, like all the Age of Empires and Asheron's Call, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, when the Xbox got started, I also ended up working on pretty much every game for the Xbox as well, like all the Halos and Fables and all that good stuff. Basically doing what I call culturalization work and helping the developers make sure that they're thinking about the kind of implications of the character design and symbols they're using and gestures and all that good stuff. So that's basically how I got in the industry. It was sort of walking backwards. I didn't really intend to work in the industry, but I've been a lifelong gamer. I mean, Pong was my first game that I saw when I was 7 years old. So yeah, it was I found the perfect job for myself.
So culturalization is one of those things that, most people don't think of when they're looking at, localization. We've had, Stephanie from Xloc on and talk about localization, and I actually sent her a message the other day. I don't know if you realize this or not, but of all of our 40 shows, yours is the one that's like second most viewed behind one of the developers.
Oh wow,
translating things is, that's obvious when you're doing localization, but talk a little bit about culturalization. How do you culturalize Master Chief?
Yeah, so basically, what culturalization is basically takes a step beyond localization. So most localization is all about translation for the most part. I mean, not entirely, but that's the bulk of what localization people do. So they're all about making sure that the text that's in the game is fully translated. There are some other aspects to it as well, like UI design and things like that often go into it. Because like the language impact, like Japanese can be compact, whereas German words are like massively long, and that does affect the UI design in different games. So that's something you have to think about. Now, culturalization, what I'm thinking about is basically the implications of everything else in the game. So the character design, environment design, the use of history, the use of religion or faith, even fictitious faith systems that are in fantasy games. A lot of times they mimic real world religions and they borrow elements from those religions to kind of give them a feel of legitimacy. There's, symbol usage in different factions. There's all kinds of things that go into it. I mean, even the even the plots themselves sometimes can be problematic. For example, BioWare's been a client of mine for many years now, and I've worked on all of their stuff for gosh, at least 15 years now. And in Star Wars: The Old Republic, there was a scenario where you're playing a Sith character, and the Sith are evil. So naturally, what happened in the original written scenario is that the Sith character threw an NPC on the wall and started torturing them. And basically, in the scenario, the player must torture. So because they're Sith, and so the player was being forced to torture this NPC. Well, we know that in some countries that's going to get the game into a lot of problems because you are forcing the player to do something that's essentially illegal. And so what we did is we had to do a quick little tweak to that. We still allowed people to torture because that's what Sith do, and you want to be true to the nature of the original material, but we also made sure that there was a way around it. So you could just like pay the NPC and get the same information. So the player wasn't forced down that path. And so that's just one example of the kind of thing that I look for to make sure that the game is being true to the material, but also making sure that there's not going to be something in the game that's going to basically eject the player out of the immersive experience and make them think about, oh, this symbol or this thing that I just saw is offending my culture. I don't understand why it's there. I was having fun playing the game, but now I'm not because I'm thinking about this. And so that's kind of the thing that I try and focus on and help developers understand how to navigate that space. And it's not easy because it gets very detailed and very complicated.
And it's different country to country. We were talking about it the other day.
Yes.
It was, it's like in Germany, at least back in the 90s and the 2000s, I think they just changed this recently, but it's like you can have all the nudity you want, but don't shoot anybody, no blood. And then you come over
Yes.
here and it's like just the opposite. And then you have China where, they had to, I don't know if they ever did release Wrath of the Lich King from Blizzard because it was that whole, area, that whole section was nothing but undead. You can't show skulls, and it's there's a lot that goes into it. So for the smaller indie devs that obviously don't have the level of resources that BioWare and Activision and Microsoft has, are there small things that they can do with their games, or at least the very high level stuff that they need to be looking out for so they don't get in that kind of trouble?
Yeah, there absolutely is, and oftentimes when I was the last ones I did was in I did one last night locally here in Seattle, but then I did one in Melbourne at the Melbourne Games Week, and I always will get at least one indie team come up to me afterwards, and they're like, I don't think now I'm uncomfortable with what we're creating. Can you help us out and some advice? And and I often will give them some free advice because I'm happy to help. I don't want to see the indie teams fail. And they can't afford my typical consulting rate anyway, so I'm happy to throw them some help. Pro bono, as you will. But so some of the core things they need to think about, I think one of the things is just at some point, somebody needs to be very conscious about these issues. So even stepping back from the creative process, which I know can be hard, especially in the indie space, because you are so heads down and you're so in love with what you're making that it's really hard sometimes to separate yourself from what you've created. But I really encourage people to try and do that. And if they find it hard to do that, find somebody else like a mentor or someone else around you, maybe another indie team or something, who's willing to take a look at it and just kind of give it sort of that third person detached look. And so they might say, hey, I don't understand. Why does the character look like that? That looks like one of the worst kinds of stereotypes I've ever seen of that ethnicity. Why did you use it? Or just somebody who might be able to see that kind of thing. So that's one of my most fundamental pieces of advice is find the time to step back and look at it through that lens. Think about how would people from a certain demographic perceive what you're doing. Now, of course, if your goal in the game is to actually depict a certain group a certain way or depict a certain event a certain way or whatever, and that's the whole intent of the game, well, you have to stay true to your creative intent. You don't want to depart from that, but you still have to be knowledgeable and aware of what the potential impact might be to your game if you decide to to tackle a controversial subject and you don't want to waver from that because that's the whole point of your game. That's fine, but you also need to be aware of what the potential impact could be when you release your game. You know, a lot of people like to say there's no such thing as bad PR. There is. There is such a thing. Yeah, it is PR, so you will get some notoriety, but what a lot of people don't understand, especially when it comes to distribution to different countries, is that you will be going through ratings board, you will be going through certain channels that are gatekeepers to your access to that market. And a lot of times, especially overseas, they won't forget you. So if you did a depiction of their culture or did something that they find offensive, or it just doesn't jive with what they like, the next time you come around with another game title, they might just flat out refuse you, because they'll just say, hey, we know what you did before, and you didn't change it and you didn't listen to us, so we really don't want you, we're not going to accept your content here. That's a more rare case, but it is an eventuality that you have to think about. So when we're dealing with controversial subjects or dealing with a certain depiction of cultures or people or whatever, we just need to be a little more mindful about it and be ready to think, basically defend our choices if we need to.
That can actually also even have to do with PR, not necessarily the content in the game. For example, the game Hatred, that game was pumped out to be like the serial killer, with all of this violent, and so it was like banned on Twitch. And I played the game, and
Yes.
you know what? It was not any worse than any other game of its type. It was all the hype that was built up over it, and it's still banned. And there's really no reason for it because it's not. I mean, it does show some up close kills, like Manhunt, sort of, but it's not.
Yes.
It's not overly violent like it was hyped up to be, for sure.
Right.
You get the slow motion organ and bone shots like from the Sniper series.
It's not even that bad at all. It's not even that bad at all.
Yeah,
and
then, the other.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say the other thing that indie devs can consider is actually building in trigger warnings into your game. So if you think you're dealing with a subject that might be controversial, you could always put a trigger warning before the player goes into it. So for example, when I worked on Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and we worked on that controversial airport scene where you're going through the airport and basically killing civilians everywhere. And one of the things that we did is we put 2 warnings. So the player has 2 chances to decline to go into that level, because I forget what the exact wording was, but it basically said, you're about to play something that some people might find disturbing or whatever. So you're given 2 chances to bypass it. But of course, for most players, they're like, oh no, I'm going to play this now because I want to see what's going on.
And that was
that's
totally
fine.
brutal. They just walk into a place and there's just unarmed people and you just start massacring them.
Yeah, it was brutal, and I have my own. It was really, but the point is that there are things that you can do, so you don't necessarily have to completely remove your content, but you can actually warn people in advance. Just so I think that's a nice thing to do. Another thing I think that's cool, like Assassin's Creed, all of their series have that little preface comment when you're starting the game saying that this game was created by a multicultural team, across all these different countries. So basically, it's not necessarily meant to be a disclaimer, but it is trying to preface that we know what we're doing. We're not making this game out of ignorance. There's a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds involved in the making of this game. We know what we're doing, and we hope you like it.
Which is important in this day and age with the wonderful outrage culture that we have now.
Yes.
You have to kind of get out in front of a lot of this stuff. So all right, well, let's jump into the fun stuff. So you especially this year have been a very big proponent of getting the unions going in the industry. Quality of life continues to be a major issue. It's like I remember this stuff going back 20 years. It hasn't changed at all. And then we had the former head of the ESA. He said that crunch isn't a significant issue, and that he was just now hearing calls to unionize. And then Rockstar is bragging about dropping 100-hour weeks and all this stuff. So why is this still an issue? And why do we have people sitting at the top of these organizations either completely and utterly ignorant or
Hmm.
just flat out lying?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, well, with all due respect to Mike Gallagher, who I know, and I wish him the best now that he's stepped away from the ESA. But yeah, he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Let's face it. So, I know he means well, meant well in his role, and I think there's a lot of great things that he achieved in that role. I mean, I think most noteworthy was the fact that the ESA secured the 2011 Supreme Court decision that ruled that games are protected free speech. And I think that'll forever be an amazing part of his legacy that we should all celebrate, at least in the United States. That was a huge victory for us. However, making statements like that about crunch just shows that there's a tremendous amount of disconnect between what the ESA is doing and what's happening in the so-called trenches. And that's not a shock. The ESA exists to represent companies and mainly be a lobbying organization for the industry, the companies, towards government. And that's what the role of most trade associations are around the world. That's what they do. And that's an important role because that's how you get tax breaks for the industry. That's how you get a certain level of political capital for the industry. So it is an important role, but to make a comment about crunch, for example, that's completely, so to speak, to use recent language, out of their lane, because it's just, that's not the reality. I mean, I talk to developers every day. I have a fortunate position where I travel a lot to speak at different events, and I meet developers all around the world. And crunch is a stark reality today. It hasn't gone away. It has slowly decreased, but it's not gone. So when I was running the IGDA, we did this. We created this developer satisfaction survey, which I think they're still doing. And we would ask questions about crunch, like how much do you crunch, and all these other things related to it. And we've seen over time, because the IGDA has been doing a quality of life survey for a while now. And generally speaking, at least those reporting on the survey have said that crunch is slowly diminishing. And when there is crunch, the length of the crunch period tends to be a bit smaller. But that doesn't mean it's gone. It just means it's been slowly changing. But yeah, then you get these stories about like Rockstar and 100-hour weeks, and yeah, that's kind of extreme. And I know there was a lot of like backlash from other Rockstar employees saying, well, no, that's not true at all. And others who are saying, yeah, it's true. And so, yeah, it's going to vary, of course. I mean, depending on your function and your role within the whole project. But generally speaking, we see these practices continue. And basically, I see it as one of the key signs that this industry still has a long way to go to reach a sense of maturity. I think we are way too quick to we like what do I want to say? Basically, I think we're in love with this image of the scrappy game developer. And even a large company like Rockstar that will make $1 billion on each title within a few days. I think there's a sense of scrappiness that goes with that. Like, we're working hard, and we're heads down making the best thing we possibly can, and crunch is necessary to make that happen. Even worse are some of the people who are still around who think that crunch is a necessary part of the ritual of the rite of passage of becoming a true game developer. You can't really be a true game developer unless you've endured some level of crunch, which is complete bullshit. I mean, it's the thing is it is a geographic phenomenon to some degree. We see it a lot in North America. We still see it in East Asia quite a bit. You don't see it as much in Europe, for example, because Europe has a lot of strong labor laws. For example, in Germany, they actually have laws that require you to get permission to do overtime. And if you don't get the permission, it can be a backlash against you. You could be fined and all these other things as a company. So it's serious, that they have these laws in place. And I think it's great. And it's also a cultural value as well. I mean, we know that Americans like to work ourselves to death because it seems like we just, I think we like feeling like we're busy all the time. Whereas a lot of people in Europe, the culture is such that the notion of work-life balance is kind of built into their existence. So, for example, I spoke with the head of a studio in Denmark once a couple of years ago, And he said, yeah, there's times where I really need them to crunch to get something done, but they won't do it. He's like, the employees will come in at 8 or 9 in the morning and they leave 5 or 6 at night. And even if I was to send a memo saying you must work, until 10 p.m., they're not going to do it. They're just going to walk out and go join their families and go do what they do, because the cultural value there is such that work is work and life is life, and there is a separation and nothing's going to come between it. So we have a long way to go culturally to get there in these countries that keep crunching. And we also have a long way to go in the industry in terms of understanding that crunch is actually, as I often say when I lecture on the topic, in most other industries, it's called poor project management. But in game development, it's usually considered some kind of necessary thing.
And so you've got a good point there. It's not just the U.S. culture that gets into it, but then we pile on, our own industry culture, and there's nothing that gets me more irritated, even back when I was young in the industry, than the whole you have to earn your pay your dues mentality. It's just asinine. If somebody can do their job, they can do their job. That's it. End of story. But I think, I agree. There's a whole lot of this stuff that we pile on ourselves because we have to wrap it around passion. And it's like you see on Reddit or other places where people want to throw up their indie cred about how long that they worked with no money coming in. And it's like, it's what we try to preach here. It's like, you can't do games for a living if you aren't making money doing games, and you're not, living a healthy work-life balance. So, I completely agree. And on the union side, I remember, way back in the day, there's always been a call to unionize. Why hasn't it happened?
Well, I think there's numerous factors for why it hasn't happened. If we look back, especially looking at it from a U.S. perspective, because I think that's a lot of what the focus is on in terms of unionizing. Yes, there's a union that started in France last year, STJV, and they got started up, and they're a small union, but they have a voice, and they're starting to build their clout, and I think that's awesome. But the interesting thing is, like, when I tell people, they just started a game developers union in France, everyone's like, okay, well, that's what French people do, though. It's like, which is, it's kind of true. Unions are, that's a huge part of what we're dealing with, is a huge cultural stigma around what a union is. In France, that stigma doesn't exist. It's actually considered it can be a positive force that helps the workers. And so it's not uncommon to see union action in France a lot. Whereas in the United States, we've had most definitely, unions have taken on a more tainted view in the last several decades. We've seen a decline to a certain degree in union creation, even though we have a lot of very powerful unions in the United States in different job functions. I grew up in a household of public school teachers, so I'm very familiar with my parents were in the school, the teachers union. I remember in 6th grade, the teachers went on strike, and I was walking around with my dad with the picket sign. So, unions have had a role, but in the game industry, I think in the tech sector in particular, the whole idea of collective action and working at that level has just been so foreign. One, because I think a lot of people who work in the tech sector have no experience with unions at all. Maybe they have experience through their parents who were working, in blue collar jobs in a factory, or they were school teachers like mine, or so they know of unions, but they don't have direct experience with them necessarily. And so I think that's part of the challenge, is that the knowledge gap in what it is. And so the other part too is that there are forces in the industry that make it tough or there have been forces where we have this culture of exploitation in our industry, exploiting passion, that's been going on since the beginning of this industry, where people are incredibly passionate to make games, and they will do anything to make games. They'll do anything to get that first job, And a lot of companies just exploit that. They're just like, okay, great. You want to work, I'll let you work 80-hour weeks and I'll pay you minimum wage, and you'll be working at your own desk with 6 other people crowded around it. But you'll be working on a game, and you'll get all this great experience. And unfortunately, a lot of people just accept that, because there is this is where it ties games as an art form, and like other art forms like filmmaking and painting and writing and all these other things. The people who do it, they are filled with creative passion, which is one of the things that makes our industry so amazing. But you get companies and managers in these companies who, they know this because they're some of those passionate people too, most of them, and they know how to exploit it. They know that that person is willing to do anything to work in that job and sit at that desk. And so for the longest time, that's been the pattern. And every time unionization has been brought up, I think part of it is that we have not seen enough dominoes falling in our industry to really get people to get to a sense of critical mass around labor issues. We hear, historically, we've heard like that company closed or this company is toxic, and maybe one or two stories a year. But then you look at this year in particular, and ever since June, we've had like one after another, after another, after another. Every single month, there's been like a major episode with some company. And I think probably the biggest, scariest precedent that was this year was the closure of Telltale. You had a company that is extremely successful critically. It has a lot of employees. They're doing very well. Nobody knows what's really going on in terms of anything negative with their business model or anything. And then all of a sudden, one week they're open and they are actually onboarding new people who just relocated to start a new job, and the next week they're done that quick. And I think for a lot of people in the industry, that particular episode was a wake-up call, because it's not the kind of thing you normally hear about, that a studio that everyone perceived as being so successful does not exist anymore. And we even saw the story yesterday where not only does the company not exist and the jobs are gone, but now their games are actually going to be pulled down from distribution. So it's basically erasing this company altogether. And that's scary. So yeah, I can stop there, but I have another.
No,
But
it's the one part I would push back on is, and maybe I am old and cynical. Maybe anyone who watches the show pretty much knows I am. I don't know
where you got the word maybe from.
Yeah. I don't know that this year's been any worse than any other year. It's every time we seem to get to a studio shipping something, a major, publisher shipping something, we see 70% of that team laid off, or we have companies that go out of business every month. There's the ones that you hear about, and then there's 5 times as many that you don't hear about, because this industry is so absolutely brutal.
Like they just got swallowed up.
It's one of those things that drives me nuts as well. And I completely, like normal, got off my train of thought on wherever we were going. But my usual mentality mixed with cold medicine. This is awesome.
Well, to that point, I think generally my sense is that this year has been particularly brutal because a lot of the seeing are big companies. It's not like smaller mid-sized companies that are closing, which I agree. We that kind of the rise and fall happens all the time. But this year, I think it's been particularly visible, the degree to which, even larger companies can't have these problems. And, one of the criticisms I've had people push back on me when I say, well, I think a union would be useful because it's going to protect the rights of workers. And they say, well, that's not going to stop a company like Telltale from closing. I'm like, well, that's absolutely true. But what it's going to do, it's going to protect the workers from the stupidity and the incompetence of the management, so that if they do close, and then the workers are actually going to be guaranteed benefits and guaranteed a certain amount of salary, which in the case of Telltale, none of that happened. It was basically, you're now on the street, and that's why it's not a surprise that there's a class action lawsuit now against the former management um, by the employees, and I hope they win it because they deserve to win it. But part of the struggle with unionization is that it ultimately takes a group of people who come together and decide to actually make this happen collectively. It's not an easy thing to do. Unions are complicated. They require resources. They require lawyers. It is a long process to actually get a union incorporated. I believe it's a 501c5 labor organization as opposed to like a 501c6 professional association or 501c3 nonprofit. So that has particular rules around it that you have to, jump through all these hoops, make it happen. And then of course, once you have it, you have to get people willing to be on board. And typically how a union gets started, you can either start it external to a company and then, basically get people to join, from the company, or more typically what's happened, at least historically, is that people form a union at a specific company, either with the help of an external organization or they just start it themselves. They basically just band together and decide, we are not going to take this shit anymore. We're going to create our own collective organization that will bargain with management. And if there's one thing that was absolutely crystal clear running the IGDA for 5 years and talking to literally thousands and thousands of developers worldwide, is that developers are desperate to have leverage. They want to feel like they've got some kind of recourse in case this stuff happens to them. It's not that they necessarily want to use the recourse, because obviously for most people, they don't want to see labor action. They don't want to go on strike. They don't want to stop making games. They just want to know that they've got their job is protected as best as possible. And even if the company folds, that they're going to have a soft landing rather than just be kicked out of the plane without a parachute. They want that kind of assurance, and they want some kind of leverage as workers to be able to talk to management and negotiate these kinds of things. And that's essentially what a union is for. It basically sets the stage for doing collective bargaining between employees and management so that everyone is on the same page in terms of here's how much you get paid, here's what it looks like if this happens or if that happens, and so on and so on. But again, the reason I think it hasn't happened is because we don't really have a precedent for unionization in the tech sector at all. It just has not been something historically that technology companies have either allowed and or technology workers have not seen as an option for them. And I think some of that is because there's just that knowledge gap, and some of it is because they'll look at another, like a fellow industry like film, which is often the one most people point to, and they say, look, at Hollywood is highly unionized and it still has all these problems, and and all these, they'll cite all these things from friends they know working like the Writers Guild or Producers Guild or whatever. And yeah, there are still problems. Unions don't solve everything at all, but again, they provide a structure for collective bargaining and collective action, which I think is critical to the long-term success and the health of any industry, including the game industry. So, but having said all that, I also think that unions, like for indie developers, what is a union going to do for indie developers? I think it's highly unlikely that a 3 or 5 person indie studio would unionize, because what's the point? I mean, you are basically the owners and you're the workers. And so I don't really see unions being a direct benefit necessarily to indie studios. I mean, it depends. I mean, they could hit a certain threshold, and if a union exists out there, it's actually more like a guild or a co-op type structure, which I think actually would work better for indies. So I think in a co-op collective bargaining kind of structure for indies, where say like several smaller indie studios get together and form a co-op, and they collectively bargain as a co-op to certain publishers. I think that model would work really well for indies. But the other thing that I think would be helpful, which is actually the project I'm working on first and foremost right now, is creating a legal defense fund, because a legal defense fund basically can help anybody across any spectrum of the industry. So if you're an indie developer who's being handed a contract by a publisher and you don't really have the legal expertise or the resources, you would have someone to go to who could help walk you through the contract and help you understand what's going on. If you're somebody at a big AAA company and you're being sexually harassed and you've escalated to management and they've just ignored it, you would have a resource. You could go to a legal defense fund and seek help and get lawyers to support you and see if you have a case and take action. So I don't think these things are mutually exclusive. I think all of these things can and should exist together. I think I would love to see indie co-ops. I would love to see AAA unions. I would love to see this legal defense fund take off. Basically, all of these things are different forms of leverage that I feel are really important, honestly, for the future of our industry.
So we had a comment and a question from Heine. He says, whoops, just scroll down. I am of the opinion that we need to diversify and open up other markets to make money with the same quality of work you see in the top of this industry. E-learning, serious games, games and health, games and advertising, get people interacting with your brand. Quite sure at least the same amount of money can be made there, increasing the fields developers can make money. And what do you think, Kate?
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that's one of the big frontiers that I think we have yet to cross as an industry. We are so entertainment focused, which is great. That is the core of what we do, and that's always going to be the case. But our technology and our approach to solving problems is so powerful. That's one of the things I often remind people when I give advocacy focused talks. I try and remind the audience, if they're a game developer audience, that what they're doing is basically they are currently evolving human narrative and human problem solving. We've had all these other media forms that have come before us to express human narrative and how humans pass stories one to another, and also how we learn. And I think games are right now at the forefront of that evolution of those very fundamental human processes. And so that's something to take seriously. It's something to be super proud about. And that whole area of e-learning, and I don't want to say gamification because I kind of hate that term, but
God, I do too. Thank you, Kate.
but it's just, but I understand when people say it, I kind of know what they mean, but basically bringing our approach to problem solving and narrative, we know how, that's why we do this. That's part of the passion that I think that we feel for the medium that we work in, is that we know it can be life-changing in a really positive way. And so I think that is a frontier that is still mostly untouched. A lot of serious game companies have not done very well. A lot of serious game projects, they tend to rely on government funding or some kind of educational grant type funding. Unfortunately, you don't see a lot of the big successful entertainment focused companies investing in that space, and I really wish they would. I would love to see more of the bigger companies. I mean, you could argue that Microsoft did that by buying Minecraft, because they see Minecraft as an educational tool, which it is, and so they're using that very heavily for educational programs. So I think that's a step in the right direction. And especially Minecraft's a special example because they took something that was already so incredibly popular, and now they're finding ways to leverage it to make it more of a great learning tool and actually perhaps use it outside of entertainment purposes. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. But it's going to take a lot to convince people to go into that area, because right now it is kind of risky.
All right, so I've got two more questions, and I know you're on a time crunch, so I want to make sure we get as much in here as we possibly can. If those of us in the U.S. in particular got together and had a union that represented developers and was pushing for a lot of these quality of life issues, all of this sort of stuff, wouldn't that just force more outsourcing, to Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, places that have a much lower cost of living, and places that are willing to take on, this contract? And I'm thinking primarily in terms of the larger to mid-sized publishers, and their outsourced work that go to typically the medium-sized developers.
Yeah. Well, I think there's always that fear, and that's usually the number one pushback from any C-level person or anyone I've met in the industry who is not, I won't say they're anti-union, but they're skeptical. And there's a lot of their skepticism is based on the notion that companies will instantly outsource all of this work to other places. And let's face it, companies have already been doing that. They've already been outsourcing some of this work. because cheap is cheap, and it doesn't matter if it's under threat of unionization or not. That's what the globalized market is all about. So a lot of companies have already been outsourcing certain tasks, certainly not all tasks, but certain tasks to certain areas. That's why you see like some of these larger publishers open up a satellite studio in Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia because they know that the labor is cheaper. But what I have found in my experience is that I think that fear is largely there is a certain reality to it, but I think it is a much overblown fear. I can tell you right now, they are not going to outsource core game design skills to other countries because those core game design skills are not fully developed in the way that you'll find like in the United States. There's a reason why a lot of educational institutions around the world still try and seek speakers and educators from the US or the UK or some of these more established game development markets, because there is something to be said about the level of expertise that has gone into creating a lot of these games. And of course, that expertise will develop as well in these other markets in East. I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying it's not as fully prevalent in somewhere like Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia as it would be in the US, where you go to the US and I mean, you could find very accomplished game designers like everywhere, in all kinds of different cities. And of course, like in the big hubs, like here in Seattle or San Francisco or Austin or wherever. You're going to find a lot of people who are very qualified to do those kind of jobs, and you're not going to find that level of qualification as universally in these other places. So I think companies would find it difficult to automatically just say, okay, fine, we're going to outsource this whole game title to another country. It's like, it's not going to be that easy. And I know that for a fact. And plus they're also going to be dealing with, there's other government regulations at some of these other countries. So unless they've already worked out some kind of deal, some kind of tax break deal or some other kind of relationship with the government, that doesn't mean they're automatically save more money. So there's a lot of factors that go into this. I do think, the threat of outsourcing, it's something that every industry worries about in a globalized economy, but I don't think the threat is quite as advanced and in your face as a lot of people like us to believe when it comes to game development.
I just gonna cut in really quick. Daily Llama, thank you so much for the sub. Welcome. Woo! We got a new sub, Jay. Thank you.
Yay! Love it. All right. So, and this is where I want to get a little bit off the track of what we were planning to talk about. I mean, obviously, we have plans here on this show, and we just did a press release yesterday that said, hey, look, we've been doing this for 6 months now. We've got 40 episodes. This is something, educating a lot of the people in the industry who, quite frankly, don't have a lot of options on the business side, the marketing side, to go out and learn, this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do here on the show to help get this message out? Are there topics that we need to be looking at, folks that we need to be looking to have on, because I agree with you. And I'm one of those that says, I don't know, will they start outsourcing it? But, after what you just said, you're right. Because my last company, the first company that I started, was a production house before there was actually a word for having a production house. But that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
We worked with big franchises, and, we did the design and the production in-house, and we had teams, not always overseas, but I mean, we didn't have an in-house studio that did, the code and the art and all that kind of good stuff that goes along with it.
Right.
So are there other areas to, that we can use to get it out there? Yeah, Hexad, it's already out there on YouTube. We'll throw the link out there to get it there. But what can we be doing to help all this?
Well, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, especially around this topic in particular. I mean, indies. I indie developers. I mean, I love hanging out with indie developers because honestly, and I often will say that I actually said this last night in my culturalization talk, is that the force of innovation in our industry is with indies, and I think we've known that for a while now. When we see huge games come out like Red Dead Redemption 2, I mean, I've been playing a little bit. It's a phenomenal game. It's an amazing game. It took hundreds of millions to make. It shows everywhere. It's a really remarkable game. But when we're seeing true, in my opinion, true innovation in forwarding the art form of games, that's coming out of the indie space because they can take risks and they're willing to take these risks. They're willing to go down their creative paths that are so unique based on the individuals, who've learned these tools because they've become democratized and they're readily available. So we're seeing so many more ideas coming out of so many more places that we never saw before. And I think that's fantastic. And I want to see that continue to happen. And I mean, obviously, the big publishers know this. That's why they all have, indie publishing outlets through the Xbox and PlayStation and everything else, because they know that's where a lot of this innovation is coming from. So in a lot of ways, to me, indies have sort of a creative upper hand to a certain degree, at least collectively they do. And so I think that's something to be used as an advantage. A lot of indie developers, bless their heart, but they are so desperate to get that first, project out the door, which is important because no matter what you do, you got to finish. You can't just say, well, we're going to release in Q3 2020. It's like, get the fucking thing done and get it out, because releasing is a big part of being a developer. It's, actually making the game is one part, but actually going through the release cycle and actually getting something out the door is also a big part of the experience. So you got to do it. Because I know far too many people who've been working on their dream project for far too many years. And it's just like, just figure out a good stopping point and do it and just release it. And if you don't like exactly what you did, well, guess what? You can work on the next one.
Yeah, because technology is going to surpass what you're doing.
Absolutely. You linger too long on what, even a couple years of technology is already different now. And so you might have to rethink your project. And I know people who've been caught into that cycle where they don't finish quick enough, and then they want to rethink everything they did over the last 2 or 3 years. And there's like this perpetual creative cycle, which I actually think can be really unhealthy because there's a good feeling about shipping, and so I think one of the things that's good to focus on is kind of just the business of indie development. There is the art of development, which is super important, but I think the number one thing that I often encounter with indies, it's not that they don't have the artistic and the development and the design skills. They do. That's why they're doing what they're doing, and they're amazing at it. What they don't have is understanding the business side of things. How do you actually ship something? What does it look like to market something? What do you do if you're actually successful? What happens then? I mean, it's like, do you have an agreement with the people on the team about how the money's being divided up and who's getting paid what, who has ownership of the IP? All of this kind of stuff needs to be discussed because it's not just about creating a game. You're actually creating a business. Especially if you're successful, you will suddenly have a business and you are suddenly running a successful business. And that's the one thing I've seen a lot of indies being very unprepared for. But along with that, that's kind of the fundamentals. But along with that, kind of back to our collective action issue, I think more and more indies should seriously explore the power in numbers notion, which is basically see if there's a way that you can partner with local indie devs, local to you or regional or whatever it is, to form a co-op in which you could actually collectively not only potentially work together, and you don't have to, but actually the co-op exists so that you have bargaining power. You have collective bargaining power as an indie co-op where you work together. So an indie co-op basically is where you would form an organization that, maybe members from different indie teams would be a part of the board and would run. And basically the whole point is that among the co-op, you collectively agree, like what are your rates and what are your terms and all that kind of stuff. So basically, when you're dealing with an external entity like a bigger publisher, you have that collective power behind you, and you've got established rates and all these things. So basically, the publisher can't push you around because you've got other teams to back you up. And that's really important. I mean, that's where I kind of go back to my earlier comment that it's important for indies to understand that they have, I think, especially if they're working on something that's potentially successful in the eyes of a publisher, you've got power. You've got a certain level of leverage already because there's interest in what you're creating. So don't squander it by being desperate and signing the contract just because you want to get that contract. I mean, you do have to be, judicious about what you're signing. You have to think about it. but to have kind of have some level of collective power behind you is really important. And so I would encourage them to explore that space and think about what that would look like, because I think that could be one of the key things that may or may not actually lead to the creation of like larger unions. You see a lot of indies starting to band together, because it's again, there's safety in numbers.
All right, we got another question from Heine. You want me to go ahead and do that one, Jay? Or
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the midst of all this, I have a friend of mine who's been in the industry forever and ever and ever as well. And I sent him a note on Facebook, like in the midst of this, because I know he has talked about doing co-ops in the past. And that's something that I want to dive into on another show. But yeah, let's get back to Indy's question. I mean, not Indy's question, Heine's question.
I am just the mouth. I'm just Heine's mouth. It's Heine's question. I'm not going to take credit
Wow.
for it. All right.
Phrasing?
Yeah. It's all in the beard, Jay. You should know that. All right. Okay, here's what Heine says. I've seen now a couple of indies of which the people starting first just had another job, know how the world works, and then started a studio, or some having their MBA and then starting a studio, like Lucky Cat Studios, and you see much higher success rate. How can we push this more, or how can we insert more business-orientated people in the industry among indies?
Can you read that question again? Because I cut out.
Okay. Let me get back to it again. So how you see a higher success rate with people that basically what he's saying that have like a business background or they're already successful in another industry. How can we push this more, or how can we insert more business-oriented people into the industry among indies?
Yes. So that's a great question. So I think part of it is that I think one of the things I think a lot of indies need to understand is that business training or the business knowledge, it's out there. I mean, a lot of states, a lot of cities will have like a chamber of commerce, or they'll have like a small business bureau or some kind of entity like that where they'll do like free classes on taxes or free classes on IP protection or something. I mean, I know here in Seattle they do that kind of stuff all the time, and I know there's different areas around the country where it's very frequent. You just have to seek it out, but it's often there. It's often one of those very forgotten resources that your taxes for your state or your federal government actually pay for something. And so I would encourage people to seek that out locally and see, because those things can be super valuable. Or sometimes there's local companies that will do like free seminars or free workshops on this kind of thing for small businesses. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there for small businesses. I mean, even the government has the Small Business Administration, which has a lot of resources on their website. It's just a matter of people seeking this stuff out. That doesn't instantly make you a smart business person, but it does kind of start you down that path of understanding what you need to know. In my experience, I've met a lot of people, even just accountants or tax preparers or people who work in these fundamental business areas who, when you tell them you're working in the game industry or you're working on a game, they're like super excited because most of them are gamers. And so they're like, oh, I would love to work with you. Yeah, let me help you. I would love to, of course you're going to have to pay them at some point. But, if you're successful or even mildly successful, you should already have an accountant. You should already have a tax preparer. You should have these people waiting in the wings anyway. So, I think in my experience, a lot of people, because games are just, let's face it, we're the cool thing. We are the cool kids on the block right now. And a lot of times when I talk to people who don't work in games, but they work in a business field, whether they're a business development person or a marketing person or whatever, if you reach out to them and they're like, I would love to get your insight or help with this, they're usually very excited to be asked because they really want to be a part of the space. Now, of course, that has its own dangers. Like, that's fine for accounting or tax preparation because they don't really need to know the game space in order to be helpful. But if there's somebody like in PR and marketing, they need to know the game space really well. So yeah, you don't want to just get someone off the street say, yeah, I've been famous for selling medical devices to hospitals. That's great. No, thank you.
Let's go pitch projects. What's our?
Yeah, exactly. So, so there are quite a few people in the industry already who have a business background. I know a lot of in the industry. They tend to be people who work on the biz dev side, and they tend to work for the larger companies. I think for indie devs, like I said, I think the biggest thing that they can do to help themselves is honestly reach out to a lot of these resources that are there. And I know that they're out there, and just take advantage of them, and just spend some time as part of your development process. Commit a certain percentage of your time to also understanding the business side of things, and trying to ramp up your knowledge in that space. And I know there's oftentimes with these small business groups that are local, oftentimes there are people there who are, willing to be and willing to help out. Of course, if you don't find them locally, you always find people who are in the industry who have experience, and oftentimes they're willing to be a mentor. Up to a point. If you're going to ask them to do extensive work, then obviously they'll probably want to get paid for it. But a lot of people are willing to provide a little bit of mentoring, just to kind of help guide you along and help you understand what you really need to know. And a lot of that is just predicated on the fact that you need to want it, and you need to want to be able to reach out and get the knowledge.
And not to shamelessly plug, but that's exactly what my company does. So if we do mentors at conferences, and then we are a niche biz dev and marketing consulting firm for indies. And so I know there are people out there that specialize in this, because I'm one of them. So
Yes,
all right. I know, Kate, you got to roll. Has anyone
I do.
else
I'm sorry.
got well, we'll get, if there are other questions, we'll ping them on Discord. We put the link up in Discord a few minutes ago. Anyone that you're welcome to join. Kate, we will let you go. Thank you very much. And then Indy and I will go through a couple of announcements, to wrap everything up. But thank you. And we absolutely want you back whenever you want to come back.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you very much. And yeah, if there's any follow-up questions from the conversation.
No, we lost you there, but I'm guessing you said you'd be good. Thanks, Kate.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. So, first and foremost, don't forget, Indy is running his 12 Days of Indy announcement or charity drive. It goes through Sunday. So as soon as we wrap up here, we'll go back to hosting his charity drive. One of the new things you may notice down at the bottom, it says we are now part of Indy's Army. We have, thank you to Indy for this, we have rebranded the Indy Army, and we are building a group, a team exclusively for the official channels for indie teams. So if you have if you are an indie developer and you want to get a little more exposure for your studios and your games, send us a note. We'll get you added. Like I said, it is exclusively for official indie developer accounts, so we can all help each other and get some of the stuff going on. What else we got, Indy?
That's really it.
Is that good? Rogue Marvel, what? Oh, you said join a business networking group. I was like, I didn't know if there was a specific one that we were missing out on. But yeah, I mean, our Discord is fantastic. Heine's Discord is, even bigger than ours, and very fantastic as well. Let's see, Heine, can you throw up a link to your Discord? But yeah, and then I'm going to need to go and get more cold medication in me.
Okay. Yeah, and I got another call I got to jump right into, apparently.
All right. So there you go. There's our Discord. There's Heine's Discord. You all have a wonderful evening, and
we'll be back next week. We'll be back next week. Make sure and go to my channel and support Toys for Tots, twitch.tv/indie. Here, we're up over 10 grand right now. Here, I'll put the link, www.twitch.tv/indie. Go there, show some support. I'll be live at 1 p.m. Pacific there. All right, bye everybody.
Awesome. Thanks everybody.